Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. And before we get on with the usual Say Report trappings, I wanted to start this episode reading a quote from a movie and seeing if Sejin can tell me what the film is. So, strap in for quotes with the Say Report. I counted 9 movies opening today. I remember when 9 movies used to open in a month. Now a picture has to make a killing the first weekend or it's dead. This is supposed to be conducive to great work?
I don't know. It sounded like Woody Allen, but that could have just been you.
Well, the words came from the mouth of actor Eli Wallach, so I probably did do a little bit of a Woody Allen there to try to emulate Eli Wallach. I'll be completely honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's another hint for you to try to guess what movie that quote is from.
You're not. You're barking up the wrong tree, bud.
All right. It is from 2006's The Holiday. Where Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet switch houses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's,
and there's the entire subplot with the movie writers, right?
Yeah, and it's that's a movie that I watched during the time that we weren't recording. We watched that on Christmas. And hello and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker. Joining me, my host companion, Sejin Sarowik. Sejin.
Hey, everybody. What's going on? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 2022 and the penultimate episode of Season 5 of the Say Report.
And this is the one where all the secrets will be revealed.
No, all the secrets will be revealed next week, but we'll have all the trailers for the secrets that will be revealed next week.
Also some extra video games and whatnot.
Yeah, there'll be, I don't know what's happening, right? Penultimate means second to last, right?
I believe so.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same... I don't know. I had a coughing fit like minutes before we started. And then I wanted to start with that quote that Eli Wallach said as Arthur Abbott in The Holiday, because that's 2006. And, that's how Hollywood felt in 2006. And it's something that we talk about a lot on the Say Report, how, opening weekend makes or breaks a film.
Yeah. Well, and how much that may or may not be the case anymore is an interesting conversation, right?
Yes.
I mean, on the one hand, we are still in the celebratory phase of Spider-Man having the second largest opening of its weekend and things like that of all time, which is crazy to think that during a pandemic that it was able to do something like that is a conversation, right?
Have you seen the Spider-Man?
Nope. Still have not been able to get out to a theater that I feel safe enough to go and see it at. No,
Dude,
I'll be entirely honest.
Certainly not going to judge you or ridicule you for that, as numbers have been on the rise. I mean, we hit a world record. We had a world record for cases in America the same day that the CDC said, oh, but by the way, you only have to isolate for 5 days now, not 10.
Yeah, kind of bad timing on that part, huh?
Yeah.
Not saying they're wrong or right, just, boy, they need a PR guy.
I mean, it really feels like we got the world record once. Let's really push it up there, right? 450 plus thousand? No. I want to see 500. How can we do that, Dr. Fauci? 5 days
bad.
Instead of 10? I don't.
Oh man, I know. It's but the way that we view success in terms of things like the film industry and that going forward are definitely going to have to be reevaluated, I think. And that's not anything new. We've said that before too.
Almost every movie that's simultaneously released in theaters and on HBO Max is considered a box office bomb. I read a list of them, and I'm just like, oh, really? Every one of these movies was a box office bomb? And then their invariable, cause effect is because people could watch it at home, they didn't go out to see it in the theaters. And it's yeah, that's probably true. But then to call it a bomb, how many people watched it when it wasn't when it was available to them at home?
Yep. Yeah, and that's the thing is like it's not a secret anymore that they can track that stuff and that they do track that stuff. Like we talked about it here ourselves when we talked about some of the Netflix stuff at the beginning of the year last year. And like the idea being that like we now know that there are companies out there that do this sort of thing for them. So the question then becomes where are we reading headlines and and analytics like that in our news? Are they privy to that information? Because like I can see somebody on like say a Screen Rant or otherwise that's maybe not as well connected as they proclaim to be in a lot of their work, just kind of having that opinion about the matter because of what they see, but they don't have privy to the actual information of how the movie actually did on those streaming services, right?
Right. And
So
I
I'm
mean,
sure that changes the conversation completely.
for a brief detour, right, which could be the name of this podcast had we not called it the Say Report, brief detour, quantifiable firsthand evidence of Screen Rant just like not doing their due diligence before they publish their articles
Just
happened this week.
yeah.
Because they published an article about the cow in the young Sheldon opening, and it ended with whatever the reason for the cow, it will always be a prevalent and present in the opening for young Sheldon. And the cow has not been used since season 5 started back in September of 2021. And I would have felt some way about it if, say, the article had been written pre the premiere of season 5. But this
Right.
article released on Tuesday of last week, so December 28th, 2021. I mean, I don't want to. I've never really had a lot of good vibes or great experience with like television reporting online. I
Yeah.
always feel like they mess up major plot points in episodes, or they ask questions like, how did they know this? And I'm like, well, they told them in the first act of the 22-minute show. So, like, I know you're taking notes and everything, but,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's a Herculean task. Like let's not beat around the bush here. The idea being that a lot of the times what happens is reviewers for television specifically will be handed 5 or 6 episodes of a show and told watch this and write a thing up about it and I need this tomorrow. So they have to sit there and they don't have the privilege of online message boards yet or anything like that, like to go to like kind of mine for more information. It's always good to try and see what other people are saying about a thing, right? Like that's easy for us to say when that's all the conversation is. But when you're there the day before the conversation starts, you don't get that, right? So there's a lot going on there that like so they can be so they're set up to fail, I guess is what I'm
yeah,
saying.
I mean,
So like I'm not saying that they should be praised for the work that they're doing, but like I also am not surprised whenever I read the latest, Vulture write up on the next Netflix series that's coming out tomorrow, and then I go and watch the show and they seem to have missed major plot points. I mean, wasn't that the issue with The Witcher for the first
yes.
couple of months? It was like spoiler alert for anybody that has not seen the first season of The Witcher yet. But it turns out that there's a lot going on in terms of time, and certain things are happening at times that are actually years, if not centuries, before other times in the show. Sorry. So there was some questions and some things pointed out about timeline about how it wasn't working because of A, B, and C. Well, then that's because on the back half of the show, a big, somewhat of a twist reveal is that actually those events in episode 1 took place 50 years after the events of episode 3 and blah blah blah. And so like it fucked with a lot of people because they're one of their biggest critiques of the show was how things did not seem to be lining up, and it turns out that was built into the plot of that show. And like at that point, it was kind of like a conversation of like, who do you point to for that kind of criticism? Because now there's a show that is sitting on months worth of bad criticism because it was written in bad faith, but like the show does nothing to clue you into that until right? Like so there's an interesting conversation there too, right? But that happens all the time where people will write up about a thing and they will have only seen the first 4 or 5 episodes, and that's what the entire review is based on, and it becomes the narrative going forward. Unlike like say a movie where somebody might be given a preview screening, but that's it. That's the movie, right?
Yeah.
Or you might be able to say the same thing about like a video game where like this is a 100-hour game and this reviewer only had 24 hours to write this. So like you can definitely see the same kind of issues there too, right?
I mean, someone that I went to high school with, they're now writing game articles and walkthroughs,
Hmm.
and they confirmed that the one that they did for like 100-hour RPG, a lot of the stuff they got was just offline from other existing walkthroughs.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Well,
okay, I don't know if you should be telling people that.
Well,
Like,
this is a really interesting kind of segue into something that I've been kind of spending some time with over the break, and that is Five Nights at Freddy's. Like the first, I'm going to say something really controversial here, and I don't think anybody in our audience is going to care, but the first real Five Nights at Freddy's video game came out finally
I don't
after a
think that's
decade of
controversial, considering
after a
the guy
decade
who's a
of
jerk is gone now. But continue.
No, but you know, it has been a best-selling video game series for a decade. Like it is not fair of me to like point to this one and be like, finally they made it a video game. But they the first one of these games that has anything like a story to it and things like that. Like story has always been there. Yes, nobody get down my fucking throat about this, but it has always been one of those things where you had to go looking for it. But in the new game, that's not necessarily the case. However, there in the spirit of that series, there is a lot more going on than what is in your initial possible only playthrough of that game. So sure enough, different people who have been playing the series for years have very differing opinions right now about that game because some of them have found some things that other people have not. Some of them have run into some issues that other people have not because they have found certain things. Like there's certain collectibles that end up making up a huge difference to the story. There's certain moments that if you're not in the right place at the right time don't happen. Like there's a ton of technical shit aside because there is some technical issues with that game, but there's not a there's a console release date in February, I believe, of this year. So they have a couple of months before they get to the people where technical issues matter. Because as far as PC gamers are concerned, I guess that technical glitches are just par for the course, and don't and that seems to be the accepted conversation right now. I will be interested to hear if some of these glitches are still around when it hits a PlayStation, whether or not people will be so forgiving. But all of that silly shit aside, right? The actual game and what is supposed to be in it and all of that. There's some very different opinions right now amongst some of the biggest streamers that are known for tackling Five Nights at Freddy's because some of them have taken the time to dig into it into certain areas. Some of them have not. And then the question becomes like, shouldn't the game just be good no matter how you play it? Like that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very, very weird watching this game get played because it's a series that traditionally holds a lot of shit back and doesn't reveal itself. And they want to keep that spirit going with this game, but they also want this to be a wider release for this series. So how much is too much? How little is too little in that kind of concept? And then how does that bleed into the criticism of this game for the first couple of months that it's now going to be out, where there are some people out there who have just not seen large swaths of this game and are just like, I don't know. There's like 7 different endings to this game, and I think only 6 of them have been found so far, I think is the running total right now. Like that kind of shit is going on. You know, it's a really interesting thing because again, the series is known for this kind of back and forth nonsense and like, oh, shit discovered 3 years later type stuff. But does that make for a good game playing it if I'm only going to touch it for 20 hours of my life? Probably not, right?
Yeah, I had no idea any of this was going on. I knew that a new Five Nights at Freddy had released, and basically where it stopped for me was it's not the old guy, so it's okay to play this one. And I'm like, good, that's good. I mean, it's never really been a game that's appealed to me, and not for any like specific reason. I loved the Banana Splits movie that was essentially Five Nights at Freddy the movie. But it's just something there. So it's interesting to hear that that's going on. It's not hyper surprising. And really, the thing I like the most that you touched on in that is like PC gamers are okay with that type of thing where like the game isn't perfect right out the box. Because that's where the bloom went off the rose for me with PC gaming earlier this year, is playing through a Metroidvania, getting 100% map completion, and then they release an update on Steam that changes the map. Because it's like, well, why? I don't want to play a game where the map is not static when it's a Metroidvania, right? Like,
Yeah.
it feels
Unless
like
that's like the hook
design
of
went
it.
into it. It wasn't the hook of it. Or
Right.
yeah,
But I'm saying like there's a way to make that work, but this wasn't it, right? Right? Like,
yeah. I mean, it's not. If it had said like it's a roguelite or the map is different every time,
yeah.
I probably would have never touched the game. But I did my research in it and found, oh, okay, this is the design of it. And then playing through it later, and I'm like, well, there was a key in this room before. And then looking, oh yeah, we've updated the map. We've changed some key locations. Some rooms are different. It was Tears of Astalon. And not even to blow it up, it's a great game. It's a game that I recommend. But now that it's in its final form, that they did the testing those first few weeks of the release, like now you can go and you can try Tears of Astalon, and I think is a pretty enjoyable game. It really is a love letter to your Metroidvanias because you get characters who sort of represent all of them in different ways. Like you get a Momodora-esque character, you get a Castlevania-esque character. It's interesting. The wizard is essentially Samus, so it works. But I was not a fan of your kind of playtesting this game.
I mean, and the thing is that like just talk to any PC gamer, and that's the way that it's been for them for new release games, at least for the last 10, 15 years. Like they have become the testing ground for stuff to inevitably get it right before it goes to console. It's part of the reason why console gamers get so up on their high horse about things being broken, is because of the idea that they've kind of come to expect that this is the shit that gets worked out on PC. And it's part of the other reason why the other side of that conversation is PC ports of games always feel kind of fucked, is because because they were perfected so much for a particular console and then moved to a PC and they get screwed. It's like the whole thing is just kind of, we have tried to become very universal in our gaming, right, as a community, like over the last couple of decades, and that's been awesome on the one hand, because having access to all sorts of different games as an individual gamer is great. I don't have to own an Xbox if I want to be able to play every game out there now, right? Like it, but that has led to a lot of these weird issues of just like who gets first go, like who are we really aiming for, slash how are the others going to feel about it. Like it's made for some really tough like navigation for game development, right? Again, something I may not necessarily praise them for choice game developers for every choice ever made in terms of game development. Like Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't get a pass from me just because it's hard to develop games, but I'd be remiss if I did not acknowledge the fact that like developing a game in 2020 feels like worlds like more difficult than it was 30 years ago, when you were just focused on this is just for DOS, like, right? Like, and only DOS.
Interesting you bring up Cyberpunk 2077 in the news recently, because it was overclocking video cards without you telling it to do that. So they blew up a bunch of video cards.
Man.
And now, like, people are getting replacements for them. But at the time, like, trying to figure out why is this happening, and it being that they put into the code of one of the numerous patches of Cyberpunk 2077 to overclock to give the best visuals. But, like, let's not tell anybody that we're doing that.
Yeah, I could. Oh man, of course. Like it just seems like that's just going to be a shit show till the end, and that sucks. Like I was looking at it for $17 over the Christmas break and thinking, is that cheap enough yet? Is that cheap enough for Siege to buy in yet? And it still wasn't. It still was not. So we'll see. We'll see what is the line for Siege. Right now, I'm pretty sure it's probably the $10 range, but maybe it'll be even less than that. Maybe I need to wait for it to be $5 someday, or free as a PS Plus offer.
So first arc for 2022 is will Siegen buy Cyberpunk 2077? And that's fun. That's going to be fun to track, and we'll see where we go from there. Also, to rejoin earlier conversations and try to tie everything up, the thing about that Screen Rant article, what I really took away from it is that there's really no oversight on these articles on the internet. Because an editor probably should have caught that before they published it. Like, they were just looking for content during the holiday taint, and they're like, oh, this is perfect. People will talk about Young Sheldon. It comes back next week. Let's go for it. Without actually... I guess nobody watched the show to know that the cow is gone. I mean, Screen Rant liked...
You want to get into some real shit. Screen Rant is one of the biggest guilty parties when it comes to clickbait titles. And you start to wonder if they do it on purpose, where they put an article out about the cow 6 months after the cow has been removed, and everybody out there like you clicks on it because they want to see what the hell they're saying about this thing that doesn't exist anymore, right? Like, it becomes like why the cow is the most important thing in the opening sequence. And you're like, well, the cow's not in the opening sequence. Click. It becomes like, is that the bait?
Well, I thought that it might be about the fact that the cow is gone. And because, like, personally, I saw that headline and I'm like, oh, I'm interested in what this take is. Not, oh my God, you're idiots. Because the fact that it went from a cow to a bull, like, now that Sheldon is getting older, he's dealing with scarier things and harder challenges. Because now he's actually in college. It's not him in high school as a little kid. And, like, it represents that fact, like, to young Sheldon when he was a kid, a cow was scary, but now that he's getting older and more experienced in the world, the challenges he's facing are bulls. And I kind of hoped that was where it was going to go. And then reading the article, it started out from, like, the first season when it was just Sheldon and the cow. And I'm like, all right, is it going to talk about the fact that now the family stands there with the cow? So then when they did that, right, to talk about the fact that Sheldon knows that challenges are going to happen in life, but if you have people to rely on, you can overcome them. I figured that by the end, they would touch on the fact that the cow is now a bull and what that represents. So for then it to end with, the cow will always be part of the opening of Young Sheldon, is like, yeah, we're almost there. Like I almost was happy with this article until I read that. And then what I really take away from it is I commented on it on Facebook that I quoted the line and then wrote, the cow's been gone since the beginning of season 5. Screen Rant liked my comment? Like, what do you do with Screen Rant? I feel like all the bosses are away. So it's just like interns running Screen Rant between Christmas and New Year's. And then come tomorrow, they're just going to be like, holy hell rains down from the Screen Rant overlords.
Well, the other part of that, man, is that the internet, as much as we like to think about it as being a sophisticated machine that now has kind of gotten its shit together, it's still the Wild West in a lot of ways. There's still parts of it that are just kind of just doing their own thing, and we just kind of allow it until the day that they push their luck too far, right? So, like, a website like this may also be made up of just a bunch of young writers, or maybe even not so young writers nowadays, that are just looking for $25 to get an article up, and not putting in necessarily the most diligent work. / God knows, maybe this person was sitting on this article for 6 months, and Screen Rant was finally just like we just need something. We just need filler. You got anything in your back pocket? So this could also have been something that was written before the latest season.
That's true. I mean, that's an
like that kind of shit is also possible.
Like the headline did read like something that would have been written before it's going to premiere. Like, why is there a cow there? It felt like the sort of article that's filler. Like, it's a slow news day and we just need something. So you're not wrong. It could have been on the back burner. And then, like our time capsule episodes, they go and publish it. It's just that Screen Rant is one of those publications on the internet that we talk about a lot on the Say Report, primarily because of their level of reporting. So then to actually like come up against it the way that I have, it's been interesting. It's been a weird way to end the year.
The other reason that we focus so much on articles and websites like this is also because this is the kind of shit that gets around on Reddit and Facebook and all that sort of shit, right? Like gets shared on Twitter and all that sort of stuff. Like, it's not the it's not the well-written reviews of RogerEbert.com that show up on my Facebook feed, right? It's like Screen Rant articles about shit that I know is wrong. And again, it feels like it's on purpose. It feels like it is because I know it's wrong. They think that that's going to make me want to click on it, comment on it, share it, all that sort of crap. And I don't personally buy into that sort of stuff, just because anybody that has ever looked at my Facebook in the last 5 years knows that I go on it maybe twice a year just to make sure nobody's dead. But like, there are some people out there where that's just their day, man, and like, and they do react to that stuff, and they know that, right? And so I get really cynical about it, because I start to think it's very malicious, like, and nefarious that they're doing that sort of crap.
Well, engagements are engagements, and if even if
Right.
you're engaging because you're angry or incensed by it, that doesn't matter to them. They still see
Right.
that the money they put into to run that so that Facebook, everywhere on Facebook, can see it is, it's money well spent if they get someone to go to their website and have that engagement, have them see their ads. Yeah, I mean, the internet's kind of a cynical place if you really want to be honest about it. So that's it.
I was brought up by a generation of people telling me not to trust what I read online. And the old joke now is like, seem to need to hear their own lesson again. But I also, that was ingrained in me, like, growing up, is like, just because you read it doesn't make it true. You need to then start looking into background sources and stuff, and like, and blah blah blah, do your research, that sort of shit. But like, the idea being that, like, yeah, you do, and sometimes that research doesn't exist, like an article like this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I doubt that there's anything to go look into to like back up and figure out what they read to make these conclusions and all that. No. In fact, it's just one step. I go and watch the opening of Young Sheldon, and I see that they've made a big mistake, so I just ignore the rest of the article. It's only one moment. It's not that hard to do the research on this one. It's just,
Right.
It's really, yeah.
And that's where I talk about oversight, because I
Yeah.
feel like it'd be really easy for an editor to watch the opening of Young Sheldon and be like, okay, so everything's good, but then this last line, that's already wrong. That's already out of date. Like,
Yeah. Well, and so, not to give credit to the assholes and guys in like Kotaku and Action, all that sort of shit that you hear about online all the time, but the idea being that this is what good journalism looks like, is like an editor catching that sort of shit, or even a note that, hey, this was written in the summer of 2021 before the latest season started, so we understand that there may be some things in the following article that are outdated, but understand that when this was written. And that happens all the time, especially when video game journalism, like good video game journalism, they will know this was written during this version of the game, this patch of the game, and since then so many patches have come out, so you may notice some things that are different. We can't be held accountable for updates that the game has made, or even like, this was during an online experience, and obviously your time in that space may differ, that sort of shit. That's just good writing, as far as I'm concerned, is to put that caveat on the page so that your reader knows where you're coming from, and it can change everything about what they take in.
yeah. Or if they're willing to put editor's notes in after the fact. I'm a big fan of that, where they're like, it was originally reported this, but it's been brought to our attentions that was a problem on our end.
Oh, corrections as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm holding out hope that there'll be a correction on the Screen Rant article.
There's not going to be a website to make those kinds of
things. And that's the reason why, the grand reveal, it's something that we talk about on the show as maybe less than great journalism, because it's literally just sort of the white noise of the internet, but it covers topics that Siege and I personally are passionate about, so they bleed into our show about everything.
I mean, I will point out that I think there is good writing out there about this sort of stuff. I think, for instance, Polygon does a really good job. I think that Vulture does a really good job. Yes, they also get caught with their head up their ass sometimes too, though, and it's because they fall away from some of these major like rules that they should be following, and they rightly get called out for it, and often do those corrections that you're mentioning. So like, it's not that this kind of journalism on these types of topics don't exist, but it just so happens that the ones that are worth talking about are the ones not doing it right.
Right. It's easy. I don't know. Especially if people if you're using Screen Rant as your number one source for this stuff, understand that it's not infallible. It goes back to Siegen's whole thing of just because it's written doesn't mean it's true, which is a message that we definitely need to relearn as a society.
Yeah.
And then to hook back up with Spider-Man, it is crazy that it's broken all of these records and everything, considering the moving-going atmosphere right now. And we talk about the weaponization of spoilers, and I didn't really think Kim Kardashian was going to be the delivery system that they would use. Which I won't go further than it, because I know you still haven't seen it, and you deserve to go into the movie knowing as little as possible. But I'd like to discuss the experience that we had as the Deckers to go and rent out a theater to see Spider-Man.
Yeah, you guys, you went whole hog on just making sure you had the safest space possible, and that's awesome, man. But go ahead. What was
It
that
was
like?
awful. It was the worst.
Oh,
It was
no!
awful and the
Oh,
worst because it was so incredible. It was great. It was, in terms of experiences at the cinema, is probably in my top 3 at this point.
man, this is a roller coaster of emotions.
Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't. No, it spoiled me basically for going to the theater ever again. And considering where things are, maybe that's not a bad thing. But like driving home, we were thinking about, all right, so the next one we would do this for would probably be Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, right? Are we like
Right.
willing to commit to us doing that? And the truth is no, probably not right now, because the closest place that we could find that would allow you to rent a theater the way that we did was an hour and a half away from our house, middle of Connecticut. And it was, I mean, when I tell you it was like a spoiling situation, I couldn't be telling you it more true. There were 60 seats in the auditorium for the 4 Deckers to sit in there. We all spread out so that we had our own little area of the theater. And like the one moment where I was like clenched and oh my god, what's going to happen, was they did like not March of Dimes, the hospital in Boston.
Oh,
That
St.
they
Jude's.
St. Jude. Thank you. I didn't. It's just been so long. They did the St. Jude's like commercial with the we could see them on the bars, the names and all that stuff. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, oh, is somebody gonna come in and ask us for money? Because like it'd feel a little intrusive for this private screening that we purchased, right?
Right,
To then
right.
suddenly here's an usher to come in. And nobody came. And then when nobody came, it like became apparent that like, oh no, we have this theater for the next 3 hours. And you know, like in the thought that like, oh, is an usher going to come in and check the temperature like they do at all of the movie theaters? Like hourly, they have someone come in and check the temperature. That didn't happen. Like, so the whole thing, like imagine anytime you've been alone in a movie theater and just how great that feels. And then add in the fact that like nobody else is going to be coming during
You also
this time.
you also know for a fact you're gonna be by yourself because most of the time when I'm by myself in a theater, I get so excited about the idea that I'm on my own that I spend the entire movie like freaking out at every noise, thinking, "Oh no, is this somebody coming in an hour late into the movie? No, it's like, are they gonna sit next to me? No." Oh man, yeah, but to remove even that element of it is amazing.
Yeah, it was the movie going experience, it was the cinematic experience without any of the negative parts. Like they were all stripped away from it. And I just have to tell you how liberating it is to watch a movie like that and know, oh, there's not going to be somebody like the one that I point to is Barbershop 3. When I went to go see Barbershop 3, it was me and the other person I went to. We were the only people in the theater. And an hour in, a party of 12 people came in. And then we're asking, why is that? What happened? Like, well, of course you don't know what happened. You missed the hour that set up everything that's happening now.
In the last
Like,
30 minutes, of
please stop
Barbershop?
asking questions about stuff. Because no one else in your party's going to know. None of you were here. That sucked because it was awesome. It was fun when it was just the two of us. Because you're watching a movie like Barbershop, you're making jokes, right? You're making comments, and I love Barbershop: The Next Cut. Don't think that it's anything against it, but it kind of feels like the movie wants you to communicate with it in a weird way. I know that the movie can't hear me, but this is the atmosphere that the Barbershop movies bring, you know?
Yeah, of course.
So then from going from, oh, it feels like we can do this to, oh, son of a bitch. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
It was disappointing, but that did not happen with Spider-Man. We got to sit, we got to watch, and I think the weirdest thing about it is they scan our ticket, which is for the theater, just the usher just scans it, and then we walk down there, and the question is, so if nobody had rented this, would like this just be a showing of Spider-Man going on in this auditorium? Because like that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
It's just we're
Yeah.
showing it in this auditorium and you rented it. Like it wasn't a set with anything. It was just like any other screening. Like we still had about 8 trailers beforehand.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the question that I had is how much of that do you see beforehand? But the second that you said you saw St. Jude's in a commercial and stuff like that, like that is the thing that I think would elevate it for me. Honestly, is if in my paying to rent the theater, and maybe this happens when you show like the older movies, because I know that a bunch of companies out here will like rent out theaters to show like Back to the Future for like their holiday party or whatever. Is if in those if there's no commercials or previews, because I like that part of me paying to have the space to myself, like I also don't want to deal with like 40 minutes of ads and things like that before my movie too. So if I can also eliminate that, like the price, the amount of money for my ticket feels all the more worth it, because if something like that exists. So it's interesting to hear that you guys still got all of that. And you know, for this particular experience, maybe that was part of it for you, but like I just don't know if I would really be okay with that after the money I spent on my own theater to then also have to sit through.
Yeah, like because that's the thing. Because I thought that it was just gonna start, right?
Right.
But so then that was all there. But for me personally, I've missed Maria Menounos and Nuvi and the way that they talk about things. Like, and I was excited to see the trailers beforehand because I haven't really seen a trailer for a movie in God knows how long, because I don't seek them out.
Right,
I think Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was the last trailer that I saw, and that's because it was a like centerpiece of the Game Awards last year.
Right.
So, okay, I'll watch that trailer and life will go on. But it was cool to see those trailers, to feel it. But then again, it's a Marvel movie, so like by the time the last trailer played, my mother was like, I just want it to start. And I'm like, you're not alone. Honestly, you're not alone here, because I thought we were just coming to watch the movie. Not
man.
everything.
Did I bitch about when I went to the movies for the first time over the summer last year, and for some reason they played the same Coke commercial between every preview? Like it was like Coke had paid them a bunch of money, and they were like, people are finally going back to the theaters. We're going to give you a fuck ton of cash to just play our commercial whenever possible. I was ready for it to break into the actual movie at some point, like 30 minutes in, just stop the movie and play the Coke commercial again, because it was just egregious.
It sounds like it. I mean, Coke, a lot of their marketing goes to movie theaters.
Yeah.
And a lot of it comes from the fact that, oh, if you do our vending, right, if you get our Coke Freestyle machines for it, then we'll, like, there's like some sort of deal with that, right? Like we'll give you a break on the rental costs of that, or the costs of reordering things, if then you also give us like prominent placement in advertising.
Mm-hmm. It's part of what the movie theaters have worked out in terms of not, because you know the old adage, like movie theaters don't make shit off your ticket, right? All of the money comes from the candy and the popcorn and the Coke and stuff like that, right? And it's part of that math is that Coca-Cola is more than happy to lower their prices even further for these guys to take care of this shit if they are given ad space before every film. It almost felt like the movie theater itself had like a backup of like commercials like growing like a tumor inside it, and needed to just release it all on the public as soon as possible. Like I was sitting there and it took 40 minutes for the movie to start because every preview was followed by a Coke commercial.
Right, and that could be it if it was a sweetheart deal and, you know, we're going to show X amount of minutes of your advertising over the year. Yeah. That's a way to make it up. But it could also be the fact that nobody else was buying ad space at the time.
Yep.
So if Coke is the one that we got because of our deal for our concessions, that's what we're going to show.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting. I would have never even considered it, but I did. I wanted to share that experience going to the movie theater and that whole thing. And yeah, it was cool, but I think it broke me going to movies for a while, which is a little disappointing. I'd like to try to find someone local, but honestly, AMC has the best price for it. Because it was a 60-seat auditorium, right? We did the math on it. We counted all the chairs up. And the ticket to do that was $260 with tax. So we weren't paying like $10 a ticket to get that auditorium. We paid a pretty, I mean, it's still a lot of money to do it. It's not something you're going to do all the time, but when it's a movie that, you want to see and you want to avoid spoilers from the Kardashians, like, and and you haven't been to the movie all year, right? Like, it felt really good to go to the theater with my family again, because that used to be a thing that we did. And as much as our facsimile of doing it, Fridays and Saturdays and everything we've done to make our living room feel like the cinema experience, there's still that line separating the two.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, man. And like we've talked about the pricing thing before when it came to the streaming services and stuff, but I also happen to live in an area of the country where the average family is a mom, a dad, and 4 kids, right? And so like that's 6 people paying to go out to a movie anyway. And if they're paying anywhere between $10 to $15 a ticket, then ticket price alone, you're already getting up into the $60, $70 range. Then you add in concessions, you add in all the nonsense with like maybe we go out to dinner and stuff like that. Like it can turn into a $300 night very easily. So if you just say we're going to dedicate this amount of money to just having the movie theater to ourselves, I assume that there were some rules about what could and couldn't be brought in with you. But I know around here it's pretty popular to get pizza from certain places delivered or brought with you, because essentially the rentals are like party rentals, right? And so there's a bunch of ways that you can get like Papa John's like in the theater with you and things like that. And you just make it that kind of experience. And let's say there's another quarantine family that you've been keeping tabs on with, like and that happens a lot. So like they're vaccinated, they know you're vaccinated, you've done Thanksgiving and Christmas together, why not go to a movie together? Suddenly you're talking about 12 people splitting the cost on $260. That's nothing.
Yeah,
right.
It's going to the movie theater. It's not much more than that. That's interesting, though, the fact that it's more of a party rental there, because this was very much you're renting the auditorium to watch the movie. Like we didn't have, because I've done party rentals or theater rentals before at the movie theater, and you have that like point of contact to discuss how you want to handle it and everything. So that's what I expected to happen here, and I wasn't super jacked about that because it's still having to interact with somebody about the movie. I just want to watch the movie. I just want it to feel like I'm at the movie theater. So when that's what the experience was, it was excellent.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm glad that you got what you wanted, because there's a lot of ways that going to the movies right now can break bad for a person, and being able to eliminate a lot of those elements is definitely ideal.
Right. But again, I don't think I'm in any rush to go to the theater anytime soon. Even that movie, the one that we paid for, like we were monitoring and like, is this something that we're going to do as cases were slowly rising?
Yeah.
Even with it being a private thing, because you're still going into the movie theater, right? Before you get to your auditorium. There's still so many factors. Yeah.
The auditorium before and after you is going to be full of people too, I assume, right? Yeah. Like they didn't keep it clean and pristine until you showed up.
I mean, but they do AMC, because it was an AMC theater, and again, not a sponsor or anything like that. It's just where we happen to go. Their cleaning of the theaters right now is like incredible. That's to the fact that they don't allow admission into the theater before 15 minutes, the movie starting in 15 minutes. Which that didn't happen before, right? Like usually it opened like half an hour beforehand, but now they're giving themselves that extra time to go in and sanitize everything, and you can read how they're cleaning the theaters between each film. So even though that is definitely a factor, right? Like we don't know who's going to be in the theater before us or, after us or who's been in there at all before we got there, right? Not just today, but the way that this thing exists and everything. But reading that they clean it and the detail that they do, that kind of eliminated a lot of the fear of doing it. And
awesome.
And also the fact knowing that like this isn't going to become an everyday thing, right?
Right.
This is not us going back to the movies the way we used to.
Right.
It's also made a lot easier because Netflix and Prime both released their Oscar bait films.
Yeah.
Straight to home. So we got to watch those this weekend. Have you gotten to do Don't Look Up or Being the Ricardos yet, Sejin?
I like that Don't Look Up is what you consider to be their big Oscar bait film, and not Year of the Dog. Is that the one with Benedict Cumberbatch there?
Right, I don't know anything about Year of the Dog. First time I read about it was today. Don't Look Up feels like the Oscar bait. Having seen it and the fact that it's Big Short, Adam McKay, and that it feels more Oscar baited than Year of the Dog.
Keep an eye on Benedict Cumberbatch for that role, because
Oh,
the book that it is based on is one of those like prize winning, comes up on bestseller, comes up on most recommended books, and has for, I think it's been out for 50 or 60 years, but it's one of those types of books already. And then you add to that, you're bringing Benedict Cumberbatch in to play the angry closeted homosexual figure that he's playing in that movie, and there's a lot about that film that you should keep an eye on. But yeah, no, Don't Look Up is definitely also swinging for the same fences, like, no doubt. I mean, like you said, Leonardo DiCaprio led. It's Jennifer Lawrence. I was about to go full Reddit on her J Law's back. But yeah, Jennifer Lawrence, like, coming out of a semi-retirement to get back on screen. Adam
Meryl
McKay,
Streep, Kate Blanchett,
Jonah Hill. I mean,
Hill.
you really want
Yeah.
you want to talk about Oscar like noms and winners in it? Like we can't deny the fact that, yeah, Jonah Hill is also like up in that list, right?
So yeah, Mark Rylance as well ends
Doesn't
up
Tyler
playing a
Perry
role.
show up at some
Tyler
point?
Perry's in it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's got the we want an Oscar cast. I didn't really like Don't Look Up though. I will be completely honest with you. Oh, Timothy Chalamet as just one more that just jumped into my head. So that one felt more that way. I guess because of the marketing on it. The marketing is very much we want an Oscar, and then the movie itself is very much we want an Oscar with what's present in it. But also think about like when Marriage Story was up for the Oscar, so was The Two Popes. Like they were both nominated at the same time. So Netflix would love to catch you on the mass appeal Oscar nominee and the like artistic darling. They want both of them. So that's not hyper surprising. It's just everybody was talking about Don't Look Up, to the fact that even my father was like, "Yeah, I want to watch it. My brother liked it," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right."
I don't know, man. I mean, like, I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of Big Short, and I really liked Vice, and I feel like Vice was really hot for a second, and then
And then went
suddenly
away.
everybody stopped talking about it, and I don't know why, because I think it was actually another really well done one. So it falls right into the same category for me. Very much enjoy it. Very well done. Pisses me off in a lot of the ways, but it's only pissing me off because it's supposed to. Like, it doesn't make me mad unintentionally. Like,
So
I think
you've
McKay
seen
knows.
you've seen Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So my question for you is, was Jennifer Lawrence's character written to be an unappealing person, or was that just my own baggage brought to the movie?
I don't know if I found her unappealing so much as, like, the idea is that, so the movie, for anybody that doesn't know, is about this idea that there's a cataclysmic event about to happen, and only a couple of scientists are willing to, like, really kind of push people to see it, and the rest of the world either ignores it, sees it as a way to make money, sees it as a way to become more powerful, like, a very, very relevant type of story for this certain era, right? And in that, seeing the ways in which a lot of what's currently happening reflected is really interesting. That's the concept, right? So Jennifer Lawrence and Leonardo DiCaprio both are, I think, revealed to be not great by the end of this movie, and I think that that's supposed to be the turn. Is supposed to be this idea that they are also unable to avoid the kind of that lust for power and more and all of that in all of this, right? Like, and the idea that even the best of us are still kind of falling to pieces in the middle of all of this. Like I think that that's the commentary. So I think, to your question, is she supposed to be unappealing? I guess, but my point is, like, so is everybody. Like, so is Leo. So is like we see the worst in everybody, and then the ones that start off we see seeing the worst in, we see some of them even have redeeming moments, and we see some of them not have redeeming moments. Like, I don't know, like this is a weird question, because like, yes, I do believe she was not supposed to be a one-dimensional goody two-shoes, I guess.
Right. I guess where I'm coming towards it is like Leonardo, spoilers, I guess, for Don't Look Up. Just everything that Sejan said was pretty spoiler free, but just in case you haven't seen it yet and you want to, I just want to give you that opportunity to walk away while we have this discussion. Is Leonardo DiCaprio's character in the beginning was kind of like appealing and somebody that I could root for, and then I watched how that like sway of the dark side turned him into the type of person who would cheat on his wife and and abandon his science for the power of being the president's like scientific advisor and all of that. I saw that. There was never a moment where I really liked Jennifer Lawrence's character. Like, she always felt rough around the edges. And I didn't know if that was my own baggage with Jennifer Lawrence and the fact that generally I'm not a huge fan of hers as of late, right? I mean, for a while, just to be honest about it. Or if that was just how the character was portrayed from the beginning. But you're the second person who kind of says that, like, no, that's how the character is built. And I'm like, okay, good. Because I just don't want my own baggage to be something that affected my viewing of this film.
Yeah,
In a
I mean,
weird
without
way.
like doing like a full like dissection of this movie, and I really don't. I think people should see it. But like I would say that, like, I don't know. I don't think, I think rough around the edges is a fair thing to say about this character, but like that that's what makes a character interesting. I don't know. It's really weird to like try and pull apart a character and say like, well, I don't like this character because they had flaws. Yep. Like, I mean, I don't disagree that they had flaws. I guess it just doesn't automatically turn me off to a character because of that, I guess is my point.
Okay, I don't. I think maybe I'm not explaining it because it's not just the flaws. The flaws were an interesting part of it. It was more the fact that, so we saw how Leo's character is built up by the media. Like that moment where she loses her cool in the movie and then is suddenly a meme and vilified. Like, it's not like up to that point she had been some glowing representation of humanity. So it wasn't like seeing how the media can take someone and make them the villain. I just, I think personally I would have made other creative choices with the character that I didn't super agree with. I didn't really like Don't Look Up, is what I'm going to say. Because also, a lot of the satire and what they're doing, putting it into something so unbelievable. Like, the movie just felt unbelievable. So the satire just, it doesn't hit because it doesn't have like a one-to-one connection. You have to
I
like
guess
think that
I would say a
further way
deadly
down.
disease that kills 1 million people in 3 years would be a pretty out of the crazy thing to talk about 5 years ago, but here we are.
Okay,
Like,
but
I
if the
think that's
movie
kind
were
of the
about a disease and people not talking about the disease, going from a disease that there are people saying it doesn't exist when we have all this evidence to the contrary is different than this movie about a comet's going to hit the planet and people denying that. Like, I know that it just
it's not to me like that,
I,
and I think that's the key. Is like like this movie is so about COVID. Like it's not even hiding that it's about COVID, and like, and this kind of shit that's going on, and like that, like I understand what you're saying, but like to me it's in the same wheelhouse as like fucking Catch 22, or even just to stick to movies, Doctor Strangelove. Like the ways in which the satire is, yes, it's about something so fucking ridiculous, and obviously this would never happen, but the problem is the moments of truth that pop up in that ridiculousness, or what, like, the fact that truth exists within such a ridiculous story is what's supposed to make you question why those truths exist, right? So like it has to be something so fucking outrageous that we would just be like, obviously this would never happen, right? Like, that's the question you're supposed to ask. And so like, you are still convinced it would not, and I'm glad you have so much hope in humanity. After the last 3 years, I am not with you.
I guess. So I know that it would happen because of what we've currently lived through. I understand that aspect of it, but it just became like another hurdle to clear for me that I wasn't really interested in it. Like I don't know. It
It sounds
didn't
like you
work
just
for
didn't
me.
want to watch this movie.
I mean, I
It
did
sounds
want
like
to watch it. Like, I was excited to try it out, and then watching it, I'm just like, man, I wish it. You know what it did it for me? I will be completely honest with you. I was out on this movie when Jennifer Lawrence, like, speaking the lyrics to Wu-Tang Clan Ain't Nothing to Fuck With in the opening. Like, it really
I don't even
jived with
remember
me
that moment.
wrong. Yeah,
I
that's
don't
fine.
even remember that
I,
moment.
I don't think it would. I had listened to the song earlier in the day, so it was something that like was fresh in my mind. So then when she's got like one ear pod in and she's like talking the lyrics and not to the rhythm of the song, so it just was so like tonally disconnected from me that I think my mind just shut down in terms of looking for connective tissue to the movie. I don't know. That moment was the moment where I'm like, I'm not gonna like this movie, and I know that I did the film a disservice by doing that. But yeah, it didn't work for me, and I'm sad that it didn't work for me because it seems to be working for everybody else.
Yeah, it's a. I mean, like it is. I think it's just, like kind of an important film because of the fact that it is basically putting to film a thing that we know has the ability to exist in some form of perpetuity, maybe not infinite perpetuity, but definitely will stick around for the next 50 years. And like people are going to watch this movie, and in 50 years they're going to have this conversation, and there's going to be people just like you who are just like, it doesn't ring true. It doesn't really seem like this is the way people would be. And there's going to be people like me who are like, no, like this is what it was. Like this is what people, and at that point they'll have other examples as well. Like
Okay, thank you.
it's
No,
just
no,
way too big of a thing that for me to say that like this movie doesn't work for me because it works too well, I think.
I think okay. So it's not that it doesn't ring true what it is. It just the truth that it rings comes off that tiniest bit hollow because of the absurdity of the situation.
Satire, man.
I
I
know
don't
that that's
like
like
how
that's the issue
how
with satire. I
how do you
understand,
feel
yeah.
about like Joseph Heller's other like his play We Bombed in New Haven, which is this phenomenal thing about them bombing Connecticut. Like there's all sorts of weird like satires out there where like you're like this shit can't be real, and then that leads to Watchmen in 2019 having an entire opening scene about a city full of African Americans getting bombed by the government, and half of this country thinking that it was satirical nonsense,
That it was
and the other
created
half
for that,
being
yeah.
like, no, that
That
actually
happened.
happened, actually.
Yeah, I don't know. It's and I think the last straw for that for like my lack of being able to connect to it is something like The Big Short because it is based on something that really happened and it's trying to boil it down into layman's terms, and I think it did a good job. I think The Big Short did a good job like informing people about what happened. It didn't do a damn because now instead of shorting the housing market, we're shorting NFTs and cryptocurrencies, and the same shell game is being played. Even the housing market itself is fit to burst again
Again.
10 years later. So, like,
Yes.
The Big Short may have done a good job teaching that lesson, but we didn't hear it. So then coming to this, and it's like, you have a real thing that you could be having this discussion about, but I guess that makes it too political. But then, like, you're still making a political statement with this movie by replacing COVID with an asteroid. So I don't know.
I don't know, man. Like humans have been using absurd situations to talk about real life political issues since the
Since
Greeks and the
forever. Yeah,
Romans.
I
So
know.
like I don't know how to explain to you that like it that is a genre that works and,
I
and,
know.
and
And I wish I just had a disconnect from it. And it makes me sad that I had a disconnect from it. But yeah, I think that I've said that enough times. I don't need to reiterate the fact that the flick didn't work for me. And I think the issue for me though is that the flick didn't work for me, and I'm trying to figure out why, and it just seems to be boiling down to it wasn't for me. in some way, shape, or form, and that's not a satisfying answer, right?
Yeah.
It's like Rosebud is a sled for real life.
Yeah. So so the other so the other one you talked about is the Ricardos, and I'll be honest, I remembered that Aaron Sorkin was doing a Lucille Ball, Desi Arnaz movie, and then forgot until you mentioned that that was coming out this week. So talk to me about that one. I had no idea that that was that got made.
So somewhere along the line, someone said that it's a hard movie, that it's going to be a hard movie to watch because of what happens in it. I need to say that that's just not the case.
I would, because of what happens in it. Again, I haven't heard
Okay,
all about this
so
movie,
being the Ricardos details the week of where Sunday night Walter Winchell said Lucille Ball is a communist, right? But Monday morning, Lucy and Desi and Vivian Vance and William Frawley all still need to be there for the table read, all still need to be making an episode of I Love Lucy, right? Because just because it's been said that Lucille Ball's a communist, the world still moves on, right? Like it's still a thing that happens in the world. So we see like the behind the scenes, what goes into
this is during the big like McCarthy era, like
it's
communism stuff,
1952.
right? Like,
so
like this is somebody pointing their finger at you and calling you a communist is like equivalent of like a witch in Salem all those years ago. Like
Exactly.
you are now on the chopping block. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's 1952, though they never say that, but I know it's 1952 based upon the episode that they're filming, which is Fred and Ethel Have a Fight, season 1, episode 22, which we'll get to that critique of it along the way. But it's one of those situations where they show up on Monday and it's the discussion of, is she really a communist? Is she not? And them having that discussion, like, we're not going to talk about it. We still have to focus on if we have a show to do. Do we have a show to do it? Well, CBS hasn't said they're pulling us right now, so we still have to act like on Friday we're recording an episode of The Lucy Show. That's just has to be how we go. So then you see like Lucille Ball, because it felt like that was going to be her judgment, was that episode. She becomes so meticulous about making sure that every joke is a B or B plus for the episode, that there's nothing that could be pointed at like, oh, she's not funny anymore now that she's a communist or anything like that. So like it's this weird exploration of the creative endeavor behind it and what's going on. It's Lucille Ball fighting for Desi Arnaz to get an EP credit on the show because of how much he developed to make the show work. Like, yeah. Desi Arnaz is the person who came up with the multi-camera setup where you could have a live studio audience who is not impeded at all by the camera and microphone equipment. Like, right. He developed all of that.
Well, and so from an outside perspective, what I know about this time in terms of the Lucille Ball history side of things, and I think this is where I kind of knew Sorkin was kind of really excited to sink his teeth into, is like we're also talking about a time when Lucille Ball pretty much establishes herself in this era as a pretty big force to be fucking reckoned with in television, and being a female in that position is a huge thing. So like that's the other like element to it that I am aware of. And it's interesting that they choose this moment. I didn't realize like where in this history it was going to be, but this moment where she is possibly about to be, like, for all intents and purposes, let's use the phrasing of the time, canceled for something that is looked down upon by a large number of people in this country. And so it's interesting that this is where they choose to go with this particular story of them, because like it also in a weird way very subtly becomes this conversation about like cancel culture.
Yeah.
And this idea that like something somebody said 10 years ago suddenly comes back to haunt them in a way that for some people literally led to them being put in prison. Like, never mind losing their jobs and losing their friends and losing their family, which was also something that was pretty much guaranteed to happen if you got fingered as a communist at this time. But like the idea being that you could like risk your entire life. And with somebody like Desi Arnaz in the picture, like, are we talking about things like with possible deportation and stuff like that? Like there's there's a lot to unpack about this particular moment in history then and how it reflects on things now. So I guess I'm not too surprised that this is where they landed. It's just cool to hear, again, not knowing anything about this movie up to this point.
So, and I guess that's the other reason where it becomes an interesting double feature, that those are the two movies that I watched this weekend before we recorded, because clearly we're talking about what was going on in Hollywood in the 50s and all of that, but then using that as a satirical like way to highlight the same things that are going on in Hollywood now, or just like creatively in the world, where you can get canceled even if there's no proof of what happened. Because like, also, I don't want to take away the fact that a lot of the Me Too movement, a lot of those people were guilty, right? But then with the guilt from that, almost everything became fodder. So it's not just, oh, you checked that you were a communist 20 years ago on a voter registration form, but you tweeted this out, and that must be how you feel because you tweeted it out 10 years ago.
Yeah, right.
But it really, like, that spoke to me, and it connected with the modern issues that were going on in a way that Don't Look Up didn't. And there are some interesting stuff. Like, I don't want to go too deep into Being the Ricardos, but that stuff about her being such a strong presence, that really is not touched on in the film. And a lot of the stuff in it sort of makes her look weaker than history kind of represents her. And maybe it's because it's during the first season of the show, and like, she's a perfectionist, but nobody really wants to deal with her, and Desi is threatened by it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe the idea is that this is her kind of putting her foot down for the first time, and this is the kind of thing that emboldens her later in life. I don't know. I'd have to watch it because, like, she does become that.
She does definitely become that. She's not that in the film, and actually, a lot of it, there's one big moment where it seems like she can do whatever the fuck she wants because of the power and presence of Desi Arnaz being behind her. And I'm like, that's weird, because I never really considered Lucille Ball to be that someone who needed the protector in her husband. But like, looking at society at the time, it's not that far off the base, unfortunately.
I'm interested in what you've said, because I do want to see it now, because knowing the little bit that I know about Lucille Ball and her eventual history in television, and the idea of being a woman in that environment has always been something really intriguing to me about her. I mean, like, not just television, but also like comedy, right? Like, it's not like she's in the news. It's not like she's, so she's also like extremely she's fighting an uphill battle. Like, she's finds herself in a lot of weird places in her career. So I'm interested.
But it's very much written by Aaron Sorkin. Like, it's very much the male gaze on a lot of that stuff. Down to the fact that there's one storyline in it that just sort of doesn't make any sense and feels like it was maybe pushed in there, or the language that they had the characters use was so that you could connect it to what's going on in Hollywood today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if this conversation was happening, and certainly not during this week. And by all accounts, the language you're using around it really kind of feels like we just wanted to also have this in here. Yeah. And the film becomes something strange because the director, we watched the episode afterwards, right? And the director of the original episode was Mark Daniels. That was the name of the director of the 22nd episode of I Love Lucy. But they have Don Glass as the director in the movie. And admittedly, that's someone that they created, and they don't know if it's supposed to be representative of the director, Mark Daniels, or just sort of an XB for anybody who had directed the show, and the issues she had with directors who would come into the show. But like, it makes that whole issue of the episode ring a little hollow when you do that little bit of research and then find that out.
It's depending on what they're attempting to do by changing that sort of stuff is weird, and I always think of Sorkin as the guy that did such meticulous research on The Social Network that he literally admitted that like a large chunk of that movie, like a large percentage of that movie, and he admitted in one of his award speeches was not even his own words. Like he just took
He
like
just
the
took what was
words from
happening.
documents, right? Like and he benefited from the fact that it was such a well documented thing to write about that he was like, I didn't even have to create a language for these guys. Like I already had it in front of me. And so just thinking about that and seeing the ways in which that kind of research was on display in that, finding that it's a little loosey goosey with Lucille Ball is interesting and a little disheartening. But again, I'll have to see it to see where it
Yeah,
lands.
and I would definitely recommend it. Anything that I've said, I'm just scratching the surface of what goes on in the film. So this shouldn't take away from the experience. So if you have Amazon Prime, it's free with Amazon Prime, with a cast like Nicole Kidman, Javier Bardem, J.K. Simmons, Linda Lavin shows up. Like they're clearly gunning for some award like exposure. So I mean, check it out before it gets nominated. And get to develop your own opinions before you know what should be celebrated because the Academy says it should be celebrated. You know, like that's the other thing about trying to watch these movies before the nominations are revealed.
Yeah. Oh man.
But yeah, and then the last thing, just the one other thing is they're talking a lot about, well, if you do 37 episodes of television, eventually one of them's going to come in 37th place. And that's weird when it's the 22nd episode of the first season that they're shooting. Like, they talk a lot about the fact that 36 episodes, and this is our 37th.
I don't know, man. I would maybe have to go and take a look and see what the 37th episode is that they put out.
Well,
Because maybe that's the episode.
Well, it's not available. It's not. It's very much like they highlight specific passages and recreate them. It was weird. It was a weird thing. The like fluctuation with timeline, because it's like you've picked a very important like week to focus on, and then to not be like as upfront as possible about what was going on at the time. Because the 37th episode would be the episode after the summer hiatus. So it's like America hasn't been sitting with Lucy every Monday night the way that they have to that 60 million people are watching the show sort of thing, right? When it's the 22nd, it means that, well, I mean, they just watched an episode. There's an episode on tonight, and then people are watching it even though they said that she was a communist on the Walter Winchell show last night.
Yeah.
So it was weird. That was the weirdest part about it. The acting, though, well, I mean, J.K. Simmons should definitely get a nomination, and he should probably win. Because I wouldn't have known it was J.K. Simmons based upon the physicality. He was William Frawley in every sense of the word.
Cool. Really cool.
Yeah. I'd like to bring up something that's been a problem for me lately. Is related to McDonald's. Is gonna be quick. Is one of those fun little segue segments of the Say Report before we get back into more meat and potatoes this week. How come when I buy a 10-piece chicken McNugget, I get 2 dipping sauces, but if I buy a 20-piece chicken McNugget, I only get 3 sauces?
Sauce math, man. I thought you were going to talk about how the McRib seems to be giving everybody the runs this time around.
No, the McRib, they clearly, it's less. It might be Soylent Green. It is 2022 after all. You know, I've only had one McRib. It didn't make me sick, but I'm not looking out for it. But, like, by your own admission, 10 nuggets requires 2 sauces to handle all of the nuggets. So why would I add 10 more nuggets?
maybe it's 1 sauce can deal with 8, right? And so 2 sauces are going to need to be needed for 10 because you're going to end up with 2 naked nuggets at the end. But by the time you get to a 20-piece, you only need 3 because that can handle 24.
I mean, that would make sense if one handles 6.
It's sauce math. It's sauce to nugget math. Yeah.
I don't know. It's been bothered. I mean, I got a 20-piece chicken McNugget even before we recorded today. And again, looking at the 3, I'm like, I don't like this. I really wish that I could get 4.
My big issue with nuggets is Burger King, and they don't do the dino shapes anymore.
What? They haven't been doing the dino shapes for like 10 years.
I know. That's my big issue. You want to talk about some nugget issues?
You know what? I'm okay with them giving up the dino shape because you can get 8 chicken nuggets at Burger King for $1.50.
Yeah,
That's
chicken
the
fries are
best
also
deal for
still a big
chicken.
thing out here, and I can get down on some chicken fries.
I mean, yeah, but chicken fries are more expensive. If you're getting nuggets, I mean, I get nuggets in the place of French fries. I don't really like French fries. I mean, I like French fries. I'm not a crazy person, but I'd prefer nuggets because it feels more substantial and it feels a little bit healthier eating chicken as opposed to fried potatoes.
It's all going to be fried, so might as
Yeah,
well at least make it a fried protein of some kind.
exactly. Instead of a fried starch. So, I mean, that price, I mean, yeah, the chicken fries are awesome, but the chicken fries is $4 for 9 chicken fries, where $1.49 for 8 whole white meat nuggets. It feels comparable. Plus, they did like the ghost pepper nuggets last year, and those were pretty good. I'm not gonna
See, we're
lie.
not in a testing market out here anymore. I used to be in one when I was in Ohio, so we never got the ghost pepper nuggets.
That's very disappointing. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Siege.
no, it's the worst. I'm back in a situation where I see commercials for things on TV, and I think I'm never going to be able to try that. I want to like drive somewhere so that I can get some actual like specialty items from KFC, you know?
So that means you're not going to be able to try the chicken wings at Taco Bell that are dropping on Thursday.
No, and I'll be honest, they're bone in, aren't they?
Yeah, they are bone-in
I'm not a
chicken
I'm
wings,
not a big bone in chicken wing kind of guy.
and
I'm boneless.
they're dusted with the queso flavoring, like so they're like cheesy chicken wings. I'm
Oh,
gonna try them because it's supposed to
man.
be only 1 week, but
See, I would love to get down on some boneless queso chicken wings from Taco Bell like today. I would go out and get them today, Taco Bell. What are you doing to me?
yeah, the fact that they're bone-in is very strange to me, especially since I thought we were still in the midst of a bone-in chicken wing shortage. So I don't know what's
Maybe
happening
this is
with
why.
it.
Maybe Taco Bell's been hoarding them for the last few months to build up the
The supply.
the market, yeah,
And
so
then
that they
they're
can
only
be the
going to be
only ones.
available for 1 week. Like it's this
Hmm.
crazy thing where it's January 6th to January 13th and then kick rocks.
Taco Bell is out of its fucking mind anyway. This whole pandemic, if it's proven anything, it's proven that this world cannot come together on shit. But the second thing it's proven is that Taco Bell is out of its friggin' mind. The way that it like remember early on when they just cleared their entire menu and they were like, we're resetting the whole restaurant, everyone. And then some people were like, can I at least still get a quesarito? And they were like, fine. But you got to go online for it. You can't come into the store for it. You want a quesarito, you order it. We'll digitally send it to you.
Que sera cerrito, baby. Yeah, we were
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. It's I don't know.
Then they had French fries for a while. Like, what are you doing,
They
Taco Bell?
the French fries being the McRibs of the Taco Bell menu is always strange to me cuz like I don't get it. But now that they got potatoes back on the menu, I put that shit in everything. You have
Yes.
not lived till you get a cheese quesadilla, add potatoes. That's
I like a
delightful.
any taco or anything that they make. So I always get like the gorditas, right?
Yep,
And then replace it with potato. Like I do that shit's
it works.
definitely
Their
my jam.
potatoes are very good, and then
Hmm.
that checks out because the potatoes at KFC are good, and they're both Yum brands.
Hmm.
Siegen, though, now that I've brought this up, I have to ask you a question because I do not have experience with this. Can you explain to me what a raid is in a video game? Like what I should expect from a raid?
I mean, it depends entirely on what kind of like what game you're talking about. It sounds like you're talking like MMORPG, like raiding, right? Like you're gonna team up with some friends and do some raiding later. Is that what you're doing?
So I did a raid in Avengers, and
Hmm.
before I share my experience doing that raid in Avengers, you who it feels like has probably done more raids than me online.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to define what a raid is supposed to be to see
So
if it's me not knowing or Avengers just did not do a good raid.
So I think that the best raids that I've ever seen implemented in the recent era of gaming have to be Destiny. Like people can rip me apart for that for other games that have them, but I think that Destiny has really it's one of the few sections that they've really shined, right? And it's part of the reason why they kind of elevated to the top and stayed at the top, despite a lot of their issues, is they always had good raids, and they would change from time to time. But essentially, what a raid is, it is a large mission, like a large mission. So take your basic mission that you do in any of these types of games, whether it's like go out and fetch me 5 pieces of this, go out and destroy this one particular building, go out and kill this one particular NPC, like that. Take that kind of mission and then blow that out. to like a 3-hour multi-part experience. And it's supposed to highlight the best parts of whatever game they are, right? So for Destiny, some people may not agree with me, but a lot of the platforming elements in Destiny that are a little goofy, but there's like some of the best like fun parts where you jump from piece to piece, thing to thing. Those will be like large swaths of Destiny raids. You'll do a lot of platforming elements. You'll do puzzly elements where you realize like if I stand on this thing it lights up, and if I stand on that thing it lights up. But in order to get the door open, I think we need somebody standing on each at the same time. That's a very basic puzzle, but like that's another thing that you'll see is those kinds of elements. Then there will often be mini bosses, big guys, big bads, and then eventually one large boss at the end. But the other big thing that's really important about raids is after all of that is that in these games, in these MMORPGs, they're all about loot, and you're supposed to be getting very good, very specific loot. So the idea being that in Destiny, right, that whole thing about how every gun you own is going to tell a story, that old nugget from when they first came out, the raid specific weapons are still that idea that if somebody sees you with that sniper rifle with the tiger print on it, they know that you spent 3 hours minimum with your friends and made it through this particular raid, and you got that, and it was the only way to get that gun. And it's part of the reason why some people get really caught up in a lot of the cosmetics and stuff, because suddenly, like 3 weeks after a raid comes out, they'll sell the cosmetics from that raid, and people will be like, well, what the fuck? Like I don't have a trophy anymore to show off, like that kind of thing, right? But the other major component to the raid is they very often require that you team up, like looking for group. Like you need to go out and find 4 or 5 people to team up with you in order to get through them. So they're also very hard to get into at a very base level if you're the kind of person that just plays on your own.
Cool. So I guess the first thing that you've secured for me that I was unaware of with this type of stuff is the multiple hour portion of it. Because it took me about an hour and a half to clear this Avengers raid, and that felt insane to me.
No, it should. An hour and a half actually sounds short. Like there are some Destiny raids that if you, depending on how much you fuck them up, you could be in them for 6 hours.
Cool.
Like you need to plan for a raid. Like a part of it's the one part of these games that you need to like dedicate like time and talent to.
All right.
Ideally.
So I guess I'm gonna give that a strike to both me and to Avengers though, because they don't really give you any indication in the rest of the game that that's what the raid's going to be. It's just supposed to be the word raid that inspires it. But then when you start it up and the first mission is go to point and just destroy all the enemies, it feels like, I mean, that's what the game is. That's what Avengers largely is. So then you do that, and then you go and you fight a mini boss, which again, those are kind of where Avengers bread and butter and work. So then by the time you get to the third room and it's a puzzle, it feels weird. It feels like out of place that you now have to solve a puzzle in Avengers. And it's not like one of those puzzles where like you have to shoot the 4 things or step on the 4 things to open a door. It's you have to secure 3 points, and then with the 4th person you have to activate 3 different switches while all the points are secure, and then you have to wait for Claw to attack you, and then you also have to do that 2 more times. Like it doesn't say anywhere that that's the goal. It's just find a way to destroy the barrier.
That's also very common. Like puzzle solving in raids is also part of it, and it becomes one of those things where people will get raiding parties together, and some people find this frustrating, some people consider this part of the element, but the idea being that you could get together with your friends for the first time in like 3 weeks to do this raid, and then you get to a part where you just get stuck and you can't solve it and you feel like idiots, and then suddenly you lose that opportunity because then everybody has to go their separate way again for 3 weeks, right? And that is something that a lot of people don't like about this style of gaming, and so they're not attracted to it. On the other hand, this is where those elements of like online boards and conversations and they become like group leaders. Like you can like, just gonna keep referring to Destiny so that we don't lose the thread.
That's fine. Yeah,
like you could go on to like Destiny message boards and find people that are experts in leading raids, and they will come with you and they can walk you through this stuff, and depending on how good they are, they'll still let you figure shit out for yourself, or if you're looking for somebody to just show you how it's done, those people are available too. But that sounds very common as well. What I will say is where Avengers kind of falls on its face in that element, it sounds like, because I have not played this, just to make it clear to everybody, but where is that it should still feel like it's part of the game you've always been playing. It should just feel like some type of like evolution next step to it. Raids should have elements to them that are unique, yes, but they should not feel so unique that it doesn't feel like you're playing the same game anymore. And it's actually one of my biggest issues with some of the stuff in the late game of Borderlands 3. And I say issues, but like it's such late game and it's such silly shit. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But it's that idea being that like there's a lot of stuff that goes on in the quote unquote raids that they've put out that feels so not Borderlandsy, because Borderlands just doesn't do that kind of shit. And so like some of it feels a little forced just to have raids in it. And in a lot of ways, that example specifically, they are. Like people were just begging and begging and begging for raids in Borderlands since Borderlands 2. So like they kind of did just kind of shoehorn in some raid type stuff specifically for it. But the other thing that Borderlands does is it front loads everything that you're saying Avengers didn't for you. Like if you try and choose those raids really early on, they tell you you're going to need multiple people, you're going to need time, you're going to need to dedicate time to this, and it's going to be extremely hard, and there's going to be elements in this that you may not be used to, unlike the rest of the game. Like that is all literally in the description, like when you first look at those Borderland raids. So it was something that I came up against when I first got to those points in Borderlands, and was a little disappointed because I was like, shit, like parts of the game I'm probably never going to get to see because I just don't do that kind of crap. But you know, sure enough, over the last couple of years, I've been lucky enough to run into some guys that play the game and are always looking for a tag along that's willing to just see that because they need to fill out the party in some way, right? Like, and so I've actually gotten to see a couple of them in action, and they're fucking buck wild. But that kind of shit, that should, part of it is on the audience to kind of know what they're getting into, because it is an element that is pretty common in gaming nowadays. But I don't think there's any excuse for not treating every player as if this is their first time experiencing it. Like you should just do that, because like it only benefits you. There's no harm in having that kind of information up front for a person.
Yeah, it felt so different from everything Avengers leading up to it. And, I mean, the only thing that it says is that it requires 4 people. And you can just, you know, randomly get paired up with 4 people to do it. So I thought that, like, oh, there's going to be, like, the enemies are hard, right? So by having 4 people, you're doing consistent damage. Or you have someone to come lift you up if you do go down. But then by the time I get to, like, you have to restart a forge, and it's someone stands on the bottom and someone stands on the top, and then you have to communicate the symbol that comes up on the bottom to the person on the top so that they can activate it, and it becomes that synergy. And like that's not what I think of when I think about the Avengers game. Like having to talk about what's going on in the game. Like
no, because honestly, it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
I mean, like I don't disagree. Everything that you have been kind enough to play with me in that game, despite my constant bitching, like we have played that game together quite a bit, and this doesn't sound like anything in that game. I agree with that. But I'll be honest, this is the kind of stuff that I wish was more in it, because this feels like the Avengers going out and teaming up. I'm really interested in the idea that you were playing with randos, because like raiding with randos is so against anything I will ever do. Like if I am totally down to do a raid, but I need to be in a team, and I need to be in a chat with like everybody, and I need to know.
I mean, I had no idea what to expect from it, and I guess part of that is that like I had only ever done Destiny raids, but even then it felt like Destiny the whole time through. Doing the few raids that we did. Like it was get to location and then either destroy everything or protect something for X amount of minutes, and then you'll move on, right? Like it felt like the game, but with the missions sort of stitched together into a campaign, for lack of a better word, right? And that was enjoyable. But then going into this and being like, oh my God, like what is, if there hadn't been a guy there who had clearly done it before and was able to, like, by the end of it, I had headphones on And I'm like, I don't have a mic, but he would be like, all right, so Widow, you need to be here, and then we'll go here and we'll take care of it. Like, so I was on defense a lot of the time, and I was good at that because the way that my character is built up. But like, there's one door section where you have to open up like 4 doors to get through, and then you all have to be standing on the certain switches to open up the doors at one point to open up a 5th door. And then it was the most like ridiculous, unintuitive puzzle that I've ever played in a game.
Yeah.
And it's like, it'd be one thing if the game were sort of communicating it, but that first time through, I don't think you'd have any idea what to do. Because it's also like you step on, so like the main thing of it is that there's a switch on one side of the door, and then there's a switch on the other side of the door. And once you go through the door the first time, someone has to stand on one and someone has to stand on the other. But then it takes like 10 seconds of standing on the switch before the door starts to open. So you're like, am I doing it wrong? Is anything happening? Like, it just takes too long to give you any sort of communication that something is happening in the game.
Yeah, and that's not fair, right? Like there should be something that changes that like gives you some indication that you're doing something, whether or not it's right or it's wrong. There should just at least be something that has that clues you in. I mean, it's weird because it's a really fine line. Like the best raids that I have ever heard about are the ones that have all of these kinds of weird elements but communicate them really well. And the worst ones I've ever heard about are exactly this, where they have all of these different unique elements, and the problem is that there's no system in place to really explain to the player how to do them in this particular game.
Yeah.
And people give up on them. This like that's what happens.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that I got through it, I'm very happy about, but
did you get anything good?
I got 2 items for Widow that were able to raise my power level from 150 to 151. Ooh. It turns out that clearing the raids is the way that you get up to 175. Yeah. So it just feels like something that I'm never going to take part in. Because I don't have, like, there was that moment, that frustration moment where I'm like, how much do I have to pay you, Say Report family, to get characters to 150 and do raids with me? Because it's like that situation where I need people that I know who play this game in order to do this. Because doing it with random people, like, it wasn't fun. Like, even with that whole thing. And then afterwards, one of the guys invited me to play, and then he sent me a message, who were you? And I'm like, I was Widow. And he's like, oh, no, I thought you were one of the other people. And I'm like, well, thanks. That felt good. And then going into the raid the first time, right? Like, we got.
I'm so sorry, man. That sucks.
Like, I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. But then also going into the raid, I have a 150 power level, and my champion level on Widow, it's the reason why I wanted to bring Widow to it, is like 40, right? So overall, she's like a level 90 character. Mm-hmm. And then these 2 people, now both level 50, one of them's 151, one of them's 153 for their power level. And then their champion levels are not that high, right? Like, but like, and not that matters anything, but it shows the level of dedication that you've put into the game, right?
Right.
They're like, all right, we're gonna leave the strike team because we don't want to be here with this 150, and it's just like, fuck off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
well,
like,
no, that's part of the problem with community in general with MMORPGs is you get those guys that are just like, oh, we don't want to play with some scrub, and you're just like, I am literally like a level behind you. Or how the hell am I supposed to not be a scrub anymore if nobody wants to help me? Right.
What indication? Like, you don't know that I could just be a scrub on Widow. I could have gone through this as other characters before, but now I'm just trying to raise this up, right?
Or maybe I play on PC and this is my PlayStation build. Like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
it was just such a weird thing, but also it's like, I'm a better level than you in some of the other quantifiable things. Like, I don't know what to do. And the big issue is that it's also still Avengers. Because that one that I talked about where Claw has to, like, destroy the barrier by you doing that thing, it takes 3 times to do it. And then sometimes randomly it'll just decide, oh, I'm not going to break even though you did it correctly. So then,
the game
like,
will just bug out.
Yeah,
Great.
The game will bug out, and you're like, oh, so that's half an hour wasted. And it's stupid hard. Like, there are enemies that can only be damaged by vibranium weaponry, So if you don't go into it with vibranium weaponry, you can't hurt these things.
Yeah, it
And
sounds
like,
like they checked every box they needed to make raids. The problem is just like the rest of the game, is while the boxes are checked, it doesn't mean they're done well.
yeah,
And yeah, it's just it's not surprising. I am disappointed for you,
I
but
appreciate
also
that.
like
Thanks.
I am not surprised that this is how the raids turned out in this game, considering everything else that's happened.
The one last thing I want to talk about, and then we'll move to something else, is there are moments where everybody in sync has to activate a switch. And the
Hmm.
way we did it was 3, 2, 1, and then we'd activate it. And even if we all did it at the same time, it was still up to the game to be like, oh, was that in sync enough for me?
Oh fuck. Yeah. Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, this, what is happening? And then the fact that occasionally you'll go in there with 4 people, right? It won't start unless you have 4 people playing, but then somebody can drop out. And like, if somebody drops out, it should just end it. It shouldn't let you keep playing
Yeah.
because it'll let you keep playing until you get to the fat part where you need 4 people to do it. And it's like, well, why the fuck did you let me
Oh yeah,
keep
I mean
playing, game?
some
Like,
early Destiny stuff. They would let you start it up thinking that you could do it, and then you would just get to a part. So and that could be like 40 minutes in. You'd be 40 minutes into this thing thinking you're doing okay, like you and your friend who couldn't find a third or a fourth or whatever, and then like all of a sudden you'd hit a part where you needed 3 people, and you're just like, well, fuck, I guess this was all for naught. Wish we had known that. And they learned their lesson, but like later raids in one and eventually in two, like they I don't even think they let you in until you have a strike together that's a certain number of people and a certain level. Even the like vibranium requirements and things like that, that's not too unusual that you need certain weapon types because in this particular raid everybody's electric or some bullshit like
right,
that.
but
That
does
is
it at least communicate that to you? Like,
yes, it
okay,
lets you know that before you go in so
nothing,
that you can prep.
nothing,
Like yeah,
nothing about that. The only way that I found that out was, make sure you have vibranium items on. Is like a tip that's out there in the world. And then like I
jeez.
didn't even realize until and there's like you need to attack it with vibranium so don't attack it and I'm like no I have vibranium like I'm actually doing damage to the thing. I didn't realize that I'm only doing damage because I have vibranium on my guns. Like
Yeah, yeah,
where's the communication there? And then once you beat the thing, you get its like Pokedex card that says can only be damaged by vibranium weaponry. And I'm like, but I don't know that until after I defeat it. So if I
yeah.
go in there without vibranium weaponry, how am I going to get that knowledge?
Yeah,
And
well,
it's not
and
like you're
some, and
picking
that's the
stuff up that
right,
gives
but
it to
that's also the
you.
kind of thing that the community would like know, and like that would
And
become something the whole community would talk about. But you're not deep enough into that game to be like on like message boards all day about it, are you?
and
Like,
no, and message boards about it are very like it's sparse, and the people are more upset about Kate Bishop not getting an MCU costume than like the game not working.
yeah.
Like I'd
Well,
be
and
more
so that's
upset
the
about
big
the
secret.
game not working.
Right, but that's the big secret is at the end of the day, my real reason for not really caring that much or getting that deep into Avengers is at the end of the day, it's also a style of game that I don't love playing. Like it's very rare that that a game like this, an MMORPG comes out that I like go whole hog into. I will if my friends are playing it. The only reason I got super deep into Destiny is I just had a good tight group of friends for the 5 or 6 years of Destiny 1 and the first few years of Destiny 2 with like with that was the game that we all played together. So like yeah, I'll buy it and we got deep into it and all that nonsense. But like I can't I don't have it in me to do like to do Fallout 76 or to do their what's the Oblivion equivalent there
Oh, Elder Scrolls Online,
ESO. Yeah,
ESO, yeah.
like I've tried because they've done the whole first 20 levels free thing. I mean, this even goes all the way back to World of Warcraft. Like this kind of shit existed and started there. I shouldn't say started, but like exists in that, and so that we're talking 20 years ago, 25 years ago, right? And like that, like I've never been able to get into those games because I don't have a group of people around that play, and I don't care enough about the games to dive into them to play them on my own. So like Avengers was already going to be fighting an uphill battle because I just don't love this style of game. As you've now learned, the community can be super shitty and toxic if you don't have a good group of friends that you can guarantee are going to be there with you for this end game shit. I really start to lose interest fast. So like game broken or not, like this game was really going to have some trouble with me. And the fact that the game was so broken that it doesn't have a huge player base anymore, which is why things um boards are so sparse, and like there's no big groups out there or Discord chats that you were just welcome to join up and get information like that exists for some of these other games because they are so popular. But this one, in addition to it, like being kind of just hard to get into and being broken, like that trickles down to the community also then not being very large, and without the community being large, it becomes very hard to play an MMORPG.
Yeah, he's nailing it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm quiet because there's nothing more to say. It's just, I guess, I like the game. I like the game as like just mindless background stuff. And I wish that the bar declare to do the raids wasn't so high. Like,
Yeah.
or there was like a lower raid to like help you get up to that. Like the game doesn't feel natural in its growth pattern. Because to get someone
Yeah,
up
well,
to
and
150 power, I just like ran the same mission hoping to get higher level stuff each time. Like
yeah.
that's all I did. And
The
now it's this
dungeons. I mean, like
requirement.
what you're
Yeah.
talking about is you wish there was some dungeons that you could depend on being a particular way that you could go into. And there are a couple of missions like that, but they're not deep enough to feel like they're good practice for lack of a better word for the rates.
Right.
Like there needs to be some more of that middle ground material for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I was just disappointed. Like, I was excited to try it because I'd like to get my characters up to 175. Last weekend, Christmas weekend, I maxed leveled all the characters. All of them are level 50 now, and now it's just the power level that matters.
Yeah.
And, like, there's no incentive to keep playing the game. Like, I wanted to get the platinum, but the trophies that I don't have are all glitched and have not been fixed in a year. And I don't know if they will be or if they're fixed, but you need to start from like a new save file and that's the way that you get them. Like, I'm not hyper in love with Avengers anymore. And it feels strange to say that.
No,
'Cause-
I understand. I know that it's something that you've been very excited about, and I've tried really hard to not
I know, and I
shit on your parade for the last year, despite what it may sound like on this show.
yeah. I know. No, I mean, like, you've shit at my parade, but you've never shit on my parade.
Yeah,
And
okay.
no, luckily the game did that all on its own. And then, like, also, I just want to talk about the final fight against Claw, right? Because it's Claw. It's from the Wakanda storyline, right? That's the boss. The fight is, like, one person has to go inside and activate a point that weakens him. And then the other three people need to just lay into him with damage. And that just feels so weird for a final boss fight. Like, we're not all working together. Like, somebody has to be off alone in this cave.
Yeah, that's weird. I mean, I don't know. There again, there's ways that this sort of stuff works because other video games have proven that. It sounds like it just doesn't work here, and it sounds like that's been the story with everything with this game. Is like they're using a lot of tried and true methodology in creating an MMORPG, and they're putting that veneer on it of the Avengers. So it should really just be a no-brainer home run. And the fact that they have been able to make it this mediocre is really kind of a feat.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And also, those people in the community, all the reviews are like, it's great that there's a raid in there, but this is awful. Like, it's not what the game was beforehand.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I don't know. It's just, I'm disappointed. And I want to, it finally happened. The bloom finally went off, the Avengers rose for me. And it felt like something to share on this show.
Do they have, like, I know they said that they had plans for 2022, but do they have stated plans? Like, is there a
They've
next
announced
character?
She-Hulk. The voice actress who recorded lines for She-Hulk confirmed it on Friday when somebody tweeted out, I found voice lines accredited to this person in a data mine of the game, and then that person tweeted out, "It's I'm playing She-Hulk." Like I think that at this point I can announce that.
Yeah.
So like there is a plan for another character. She-Hulk seems like a weird choice, just because.
Goes in line with the Disney plans,
right?
You know, so if this is the first character that is developed like hand in hand with the MCU as it stands, it seems like a logical step for them.
I guess it feels strange because it's another brawler type character. Like Wanda would also be a pretty smart person to add to it in terms of the MCU plan. And the data mine pointed to Scarlet Witch and She-Hulk being things that had like stuff in the game already, like assets in the game. So like being able to bring in, right now the only two flyers you have are Thor and Iron Man, and then everybody else is an on the ground brawler. Like even the Hawkeyes, with the fact that they have a lot of range, they're stronger when they're doing melee attacks. Like it's weird. The game's not good, and that's just the fact that I have to come to terms with. And eventually I guess it's gonna go away. And I thought it would be sooner rather than later. But
hey yeah. Man, like I have to say that as we stand here on the precipice of 2022, like I don't know if I would count it out now, at least until 2023. With what they've been able to do, the zombie-like crawl that they've been able to pull off for the last like 4 or 5 months, because I thought they were going to be gone in September. Like I thought we were never going to get to the point where Spider-Man was an issue, because and then I guess we got to the point where Spider-Man wasn't an issue, but for other reasons. But the idea being that like everybody was bitching that Spider-Man wasn't going to be available, and I was like, it's okay, guys, they're never going to get to that point anyway. The game will shut down. And they did it. They pulled it off. So now I have to wonder, are they going to make it through this year? And I'm suddenly wondering if I would bet that they will. And maybe I'll be totally wrong. By Easter they'll be done. But yeah, you know,
I at least see them getting to September of this year. I think that 2 years of the Avengers game would make sense. I mean, they're making the money. Like for all the people who complain about the MCU costumes and how they're like not accurate, people still buy them. I still play with people who have the costumes.
Yeah.
So I don't really understand this new thing that they've done, like with the like loot boxes that you get every day if you play online with somebody, or you can pay 500 units for, which the only way that they're safe is because there's no way to spend real world money to get units, I guess. Right. I don't know. Like I've come across people who have clearly bought all 100 of those, and I don't know how to feel about that. Like it's not well implemented in the game yet. So it proves that there's a market for a game like this. I just wish that the game were better. I think
and the problem is with a property like the Avengers is because you have such a tight clamp on it by the likes of like a Disney and things like that. Nobody else is going to get a chance to take a swing on it to make a better game, right? Like there will be some version of a game like this that'll come out and we'll finally say this is kind of like Avengers but better. But I don't know what that'll be. Well, Definitely can't be DC, because DC Universe Online still exists and from all accounts is a fucking nightmare.
Also, I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff for Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, which really felt like their answer to the Avengers game, which is also strange.
Like
what?
I thought it was going to be more like Guardians.
No.
A little bit more like you'll be able to play different characters, but like it was going to be a much more straightforward story. I didn't realize it was an MMORPG.
Well, I actually think Gotham Knights is the closer one to MMORPG, but every character just looks the same in both of those games. Like it doesn't like, oh, I'm playing as King Shark, but I'm still running around in like Fortnite third-person shooter style, just attacking stuff. Like it doesn't feel like there's any. I was a little disappointed when I saw the trailer for Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, and then also disappointed for Gotham Knights, because it's like, you guys have had this time to try to make these games better than Avengers, and it doesn't look like you did yet.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's also Avengers Revolution, the MOBA game. Don't forget that one that everybody was super excited about, and then just shit its pants because it had no content.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be one of these big franchise comic booky ones. I think we're going to be looking more towards like a Destiny or something like that. Not a completely original IP, but maybe a more original IP that they have a little bit more freedom with and the ability to do what they need to make the game fun, as opposed to being, having their hands tied by this franchise and this
Well,
history and this fan base
I mean, by
that
all
Avengers
accounts,
has.
that's Final Fantasy XIV, right? The game that was so bad when it first came out, they stopped sales on it for a while. And
Mhm.
then last month became so successful that they again had to suspend sales of it
Yeah,
because their servers couldn't
their
handle
servers
all
couldn't
the
handle
people
it.
playing it.
Well,
So,
I mean, have we talked about the whole story of the Star Trek Online stuff? That like when talking about Avengers, I must have mentioned at least once, so I apologize if I'm repeating myself. But like the way that Star Trek Online, when it first came out, was such a disappointment that they had to go free to play in order to stay alive, and then because they had to go free to play, they ended up almost like getting taken to friggin' court from the guys out there, people out there that were such big Star Trek fans that they had put in like $300 for like special editions where like they could play as certain characters or certain costumes and all that sort of stuff. And then then they went free to play, and those guys that spent $300 on a version of the game were like, what the fuck? But they did good by them by all accounts. And then like they kind of went underground for a while, and then came back with a completely reformatted game that is now considered a blast by everyone that plays it. Like Star Trek Online pulled themselves out of one hell of a fucking tailspin, and so like it's not impossible to do. It's just that like it takes a particular set of events to make it happen, and you can't depend on that for every company. And so I just don't think Avengers has it in them to do that, and I don't know what the next thing will be that does.
I mean, their big change with Spider-Man was the whole new loot system and adding the raids and everything, and that certainly hasn't turned the game around. So,
Yeah.
who knows what's next? All right, I think that's everything that I wanted to hit this week. Is there anything that you want to talk about, Siegen, before we finish this one up?
No, it sounds like I got a package upstairs, so I
Yeah,
gotta
I
go
know.
check that out.
I heard your little ding dong
No,
go.
I saw Encanto over the holiday
Okay,
break. It
yeah.
came out, and that was a blast. Like anybody that anybody that loves themselves some Lin-Manuel and loves them some Disney magic, like check it out. It's another one of those. I really enjoyed my time with it. I think it's probably going to do that usual thing that these Disney movies do, and it'll be anything anybody talks about until the next one comes out. But yeah, a lot of good stuff in that one.
I was not a fan of Encanto, but I understand that it's
Like every other Disney
probably
movie
me.
that's
Yeah,
come out in the
right.
last
Like
twenty
that's
years.
where it is. Like I don't know. I
So,
just I in this one I actually think I thought it was going to be more grounded in modern day where like magic exists in this one place and then she's out living in the real world having that knowledge and it would be like that and then when it was all just sort of this isolated area, I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like I don't
I
know.
have no idea where you got that idea because
I
all
don't
I've seen
watch trailers. I just saw the design on the main character was
and
just
built an
very
entire
modern.
story in your head about a movie,
Yep.
and then you saw it and it wasn't that movie that you wanted it to be. So
But
sounds like you're
then
doing yourself a disservice by maybe not
but
looking more into
but
these things.
hey, that's on me, right? I know that it's on me. But then also like I don't know, it just I really Diane Guerrero's in it and that was awesome. Giving me some Doom Patrol love up in here, but it didn't work for me, and I'm a little bummed that it seemed to
Awesome.
work for everybody else. But hey, that's what Disney movies do for Devin Decker now. I liked Raya, right? Nobody else liked Raya. Do you like Raya?
Yeah, I love Raya.
I
I don't
love
know.
Raya.
I don't know if I've met anybody that didn't like it, so I'm not quite sure what you mean
Oh,
by
good. I
that.
just feel
So,
like people weren't talking about Raya.
well, I think that the problem with that was it was kind of really early in this whole like we don't know what to do about streaming movies
Yeah,
stuff, right? And so I think that the fact that there was not like a zeitgeist around it was because we were a little too busy with other shit at the time.
yeah.
Um,
That makes sense. I don't know. I really liked that one. So I can't be one of these persons you just hate modern Disney movies. It's like no, I guess I'm a little Lin Manuel Miranda'd out is what I'm going to say. I also had no idea that he did the Bring It On musical. And that's, unfortunately, I feel like a hole we might need to go down someday. Not today. but just someday. All right, so if that's everything, if you have any other movies you think are going to be nominated for Oscars that you want to share with me, I'm on Twitter at Devin D. Decker.
Yeah, and if there's any other MMORPGs that you want to hit me up with because you're looking for somebody to raid with, just hit me up. Let's see what we can do. You can find me at Siege versus the World.
All right, and I guess last thing, I didn't want to focus on it because it's hyper sad, is rest in power, Betty White. It's rare for someone who's 99 years old to die and everyone say it happened too soon, but like, you almost made it. You were almost a gleaming beacon of hope, and you're going to be missed, Betty. Thank you for everything that you've done.
I love the number of people that have done the math and figured out that if leap years didn't exist, she would have been 100, and somehow the universe is a bitch because of that. like, what are you gonna do? Like, yeah, she was phenomenal.
I'm gonna blame the Sumerians.
You know, and we might have to come back and revisit some Betty White stuff next week and talk a little bit about that. But we need some time to kind of
it kind of came from nowhere. Like it hit.
We also have to mention John Madden also.
Right.
Like it's been a bit of an.
Those seem like season finale topics, though.
Yeah.
Not like the last things we did in 2021. As like, it doesn't even feel like 2022 yet, Siege, and I'll be honest with you.
Yep.
All right. Well, cut us off and bring us home. Have a good one, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devin Decker and Stephen Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.